Good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates. I am Mabel Sanchez Lacaba, a Bachelor of Technology and Livelihood Education student, major in Home Economics at the Palombon Institute of Technology, Tabango campus. And in this video, I was tasked to present you the Victorian era. So Victorian era started during year 1830 up to year 1910. But before that, let us first identify the learning objectives of this topic so that we will be guided throughout our discussion. So I will going to present you the following content during Victorian era, such as historical background, art movement era, sample architectural design, artwork, motif or characteristics, philosophical perspective or purpose, and lastly, famous person or founder of this era. So let us first jump into the historical background. So, Victorian era was about the lengthy reign of Queen Victoria during 1837 up to year 1901. So this era was noted for its architecture and romantic painting, as well as its photography and crafts, while its sculpture remained lifeless and over academic. And aside from that, during this time, England was governed alternately by two ministers, the conservative Benjamin Disraeli and the liberal W.E. Gladstone. So she possessed considerable material wealth, a network of global contacts, and had a unique opportunity for intellectual and cultural enrichments through the many countries of her empire. These include the old, the new, as well as the aboriginal civilizations in Africa and Australasia. So that was the historical background of Victorian era. So let us now move on to the arts or movement or era. So Victorian artworks encompasses movements such as classicism and neoclassicism, as well as romanticism and impressionism. Each of these movements evolved its own aesthetic style of Victorian era artworks, and as an example is the arts and crafts movement founded by William Morris on year 1834 to 96, which gave more attention to the private houses and its decoration, which felt should be considered functionally and in relation to its surroundings. And next is let's go to the sample architectural design. So during this era, there are a lot of sample architectural designs, and I will going to present to you the three most famous of among those. So first is the British Museum in London, which was designed by um, Sir Robert Smirke. So this museum shows the neoclassical architecture incorporating the classical orders into its design. So as what you can see in the photo, it shows the neoclassical architecture. So next is the National Gallery in London, which was designed by William Wilkins. So this architecture shows the neoclassical Greek architecture with dome and columns. So as what you can see in the photo, it includes domes and columns. So it was neoclassical Greek architecture. So as what you can observe, The Victorian era shows a different touch between the other era, which was Greek architecture and neoclassical architecture, and also it touches um, the last picture of the architectural design, which has a Gothic architecture touch. So its design was touched by Gothic era. So it was called the Houses of Parliament, which was stated in London, which was situated, I mean, in London. It was designed by Sir Charles Barry. So again, this was a Gothic architecture with Italian ground plan. So this is a third example of the architectural design during the Victorian era. So next is the artwork. So let us now discover what are sample artworks during that time. And again, there are a lot of artworks, and I just focus on paintings. So I will going to present to you three among those famous artworks during this era. First is the Ophelia, which was created by John Everett Millais. So Ophelia is one of the most well-known pictures from Shakespeare's play Hamlet. So Hamlet is Millais' depiction of Ophelia's terrible demise as she falls into the water and drowns. So the Pre-Raphaelites were noted for painting themes from current literary works in historical attire. So they worked directly from nature as authentically as feasible and with remarkable precision. And next is the Scapegoat, which was created by William Holman Hunt. So this is a well-known painting also represents the scapegoat specified in Leviticus. On the Day of Atonement, a goat would be um, sent out with its horns covered in scarlet fabric. So as what you can observe, the horn of the goat has a wrapped with red fabric, and which signifies the community's crimes. So Hunt began painting on the shores of the Dead Sea and continued at his London workshop. The piece is available in two versions. So there are two versions of this painting, which the first one is a tiny version in vivid color with a dark-haired goat and a rainbow, which is housed at the Manchester Art Gallery. So that is what I have there in my example. It is the tiny version, while the other version is a bigger copy in more subdued tones with a light-haired animal, which is located at Port Sunlight's Lady Lever Art Gallery. So the other version is much larger, and also it has a lighter color. And lastly is the Elaine. So Elaine was created by Emma Sandys, I mean. It is an oil painting on a panel, and Elaine, which is a wife of Lancelot, female character of mythology, is positioned turned to the right hand, lifted to her left cheek, right? As what you can see in the photo. So in medieval dress, so she has a medieval dress, pearl jewelry, long flowing tresses on a flowery backdrop. So she is the heroine of Tennyson's Idylls of King on year 1859, whose infatuation for Lancelot drives her insane. The theme is based in the Arthurian stories popularized by Tennyson's Idylls of the King, which was published in year 1859. Elaine became infatuated with Lancelot, but her feelings were not reciprocated. So that was about the painting Elaine. So fine art painting in Victorian Britain reflected all the Christian and imperial certainties of the age. It encompasses um, it encompassed history painting in various types of genre painting, as well as landscape painting, and of course portrait arts of all kinds. So that was the last example of mm, artwork during the Victorian era. And next is motive or characteristic. So the motive, so as what you can observe in the photo, there's a flower, there is a serpent, there is a moon, and there is a star. So this symbol signifies, so it is about nature inspired motif. So the Victorian era was nature inspired motifs. So natural motifs were quite popular during the Victorian era, particularly serpents, lizards, and flowers, along with a number of whimsical elements such as moons and stars. During this era, snakes and serpents were considered symbols of eternal love and wisdom. So that was the meaning of the snakes and serpents during this era. And next is the philosophical perspective or purpose. So Victorian gender ideology was premised in the doctrine of separate sphere. So this stated that men and women were different and meant for different things. So that this is what they believe. Men were physically strong, while women were weak. For men, sex was central, and for women, reproduction was central. So that was their philosophical perspective. And lastly, let us jump into the famous person or founder of this era. First is, okay, Queen Victoria. So these people made a significant contributions to society and left a lasting legacy during this era. So again, there are a lot of people, famous people on the list, but I also again pick three of them, the most famous among the rest. So I will going to present to you right now. First is Queen Victoria, which was the monarch of England during the Victorian era. She was a powerful and influential figure. So I guess the reason why there is a Victorian era because of this Queen Victoria. And her reign saw great progress and change. Victoria was a strong advocate for women's rights and played a major role in advancing the status of women in society. She also championed the arts and helped to make England a leading cultural force in the world. So Queen Victoria's has a great contribution during this era. And next is Charles Dickens. So I guess you are not that familiar with Charles Dickens, but I guess you are familiar um, with his contribution. So he was one of the most famous and popular author of the Victorian era. He wrote novels and short stories that captured the essence of life in Victorian England, and his work is still enjoyed and read today. Dickens was a master of the written word, and his stories are full of humor, pathos, and social commentary. He is considered to be one of the greatest English novelists of all time. So, Charles Dickens was very famous up until now. And lastly is Lewis Carroll. So, if you are not familiar with Lewis Carroll, I guess you are familiar with his work. So Lewis Carroll was the pen name of Charles Ludwig Dodgson, an an English mathematician and author. He is best known for his children's books, Alice Adventure in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Right? So I guess you are familiar with this. So which are full of fantasy and nonsense. Carroll was a master of wordplay and linguistic invention, and his books are still enjoyed by children and adults alike. So Lewis Carroll was famous during that era, and up until now he is. So that was the last famous person during that area that I will going to present to you. But again, there are still a lot of people which was has a great contribution or has a left a lasting legacy during Victorian era. And that was the end. So thank you for listening and goodbye. And I hope that you learned something from this video.